Hello and welcome to my presentation on my species, which, as you can see here, is the Parapuzosia Seppenradensis, which comes from, as we can see here, a very interesting background. Now, it's a big name, so what does it mean? Well, it was an animal that lived during the late Cretaceous period, and we'll get into more specifics about that later. But its species comes from the extinct ammonite group. And we can see here that the ammonite has the classic spiraling shell. The exact classification begins with a phylum Mollusca, which is the same phylum that you'll see things like slugs and snails and gastropods come from, multiple beautiful creatures. The specific class comes from the cephalopoda, which is the same class you'll see things like squid, octopuses, and cuttlefish. Its subclass is the Ammonoidae, which is the same subclass that we start to see our distinct ammonoidic features. The order is the Ammonitida, and the superfamily, which is what starts to distinguish our species, is the Desmoceratoidae, and the family, more specifically, is the Desmoceratidae. Now, the reason why it gets so specific here in the end for our species is because of its size. That is actually the reason why I chose this species. Its size is massive, and we'll get to that in a second. And funnily enough, it is more distantly related to nautiloids than it is to things like squids. And the reason is because of the bilateral symmetry of its fleshy structure and its tentacle arms that help it to feed. The nautiloids are a bit different. Even though they have the same spiraling shell, their fleshy bits are a lot different. Now, we can move on to its lifestyle and biology. It was a top predator of its time. It ate anything it could, basically, but its favorite predator, its favorite prey, especially when it's young, as we can see here, are other smally shelly creatures, plankton, and soft-bodied creatures. As I mentioned earlier, this boy was a apex predator. He could get up to 2.5 to 3.5 meters in length, and you can see compared to a human, that's gigantic. Their tentacles would reach out and grab onto prey, and they had a large beak tucked away in there that would crack open shells and eat prey. Their predators were far and few because not many things could eat something this big. They mainly only ate them when they were tiny. But if they did get eaten, it was mainly by sharks and the classic mosasaurs. They constantly grew their whole life, and sometimes they could get up in weight to 3,200 pounds, which is similar to a car. They had multi-chambered shells. As you can see here, this is what actually distinguishes them from most nautiloids, is the fact that they have so complex sutures when they are separating their chambers versus nautiloids who only have straightish lines. And it was fascinating the way that they moved, because they were in the pelagic lifestyle where they shoot out jets of water to move around in a column of water. We can see here in this video, near the end, we can actually see that jet of water down here. This is a nautiloid, and so it's a bit different of structural, but it is the same concept where they shoot out jets of water. Very interesting. Now, the way that they reproduced is they would, the female would have eggs on her after they mated, and she would lay them on the top of the water along with plankton and sea debris, and they would hatch and have plenty of food to eat as they grew up. But they only did it once in their life. They would do it at the end of their life, and then they would pass away. Their habitat is very interesting. They could be actually found in most places around the world, and we'll look into that here in a second. But they are mainly found in Africa, Europe, and North America. As you can see here, multiple dots in North America, and a few in Africa and stuff. But we can even see when we go here and type in our specific species, that they mainly lived in the Cretaceous period, as you can see with all these green dots. But even more interesting is that you could find them in oceans even as deep as Antarctica, and even all the way up here in the Baltic Sea. Very interesting. Now, they preferred open oceans. As I said, they live in water columns, but they were mainly shallow oceans. They followed their food source, which was marine plankton, floating in suspension. This could be found in areas around the world, such as Europe, North America, and Africa. These places, this is all shown during the late Cretaceous, where they had inland seas and the continents were covered in water. And so that's where they mainly lived. And as I keep mentioning, this is during the late Cretaceous period. Most ammonites lived during the Cretaceous and the Jurassic period, starting in the Jurassic period, about 240 million years ago. And all ammonites actually went extinct about 65 million years ago, including our species. But our species specifically lived between 100 million years ago and 72 million years ago, which is the Cenomanian and the Campanian ages, as you can see here. They lived anywhere in between here. And so what events happened during this time? Well, there's interesting stuff. There's the Cretaceous chalks that forms and becomes quite prominent during this time, and that's mainly because you see these inland seas. All of this stuff is just glorious grounds for reef builders and plankton to build up on the floor and eventually get deposited and turned into limestone here and chalks. All these shallow sieves started to become, apparent during the Cretaceous period. Now, near the end, another interesting thing that happens is we can see India all the way down here. This is the end of the Cretaceous period. It starts moving up and forms the Himalayan mountains as it collides with Asia. Another interesting thing is that angiosperms co-evolved with insects. There was first bees and moths to appear here. And so you can see near the late end of the Cretaceous period that pollen and nectar began to becoming very common with insects to start spreading that around. And finally, the biggest thing that even leads to the extinction of our species is the mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous period, and depicted in this image here. Very interesting events, all leading up to our final slide, which I wanted to just quickly throw in there some fun facts. So the actual shell made on the ammonites were made from aragonite, which is similar to pearls, as you can see in this image here. It was also recently discovered that females are larger than males, and this is led to be believed because of the fact that the females need to deposit the eggs, and so they need to have to be a bit bigger. Some ammonites were also believed to have horns, even being iridescent too, based off of their diets. You can see here in this photo the horns poking out. And finally, I have a quick video showing a few fossils that I have found over the years. Alright, so here are just a few fossils that I found over the years. First one being just a classic gastropod. I don't know if you can make out the fine details, but yeah. We also have here, I don't really know if it's an ammonite or not, but you can see the ridge lines here. Also on the inside, it's got the sutures that make the different chambers for structural support. And then on this final one, we have a big old ammonite, just a chunk of one. Well, alright, that was my presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed, and here are my sources, and let me know if you have any questions.